Yes, good folks of the interwebs, I have heard your calls. But seriously, a lot of people have asked me to make a video about the hidden blade from Assassin's Creed, and there you go, now I'll finally comment on that. This is obviously not an official replica, it's just something I rigged up quickly. Windlass used to make a hidden blade with an actual steel blade, but judging by the reviews it doesn't seem to have been very good, and it's out of production now. Otherwise there are plenty of just plastic costume props, and I didn't feel like wasting money on that. Quite a few people have made a hidden blade at home, but they are for the most part not functional. I mean, they are functional in the sense that you can play around with them and extend and retract the blade, stuff like that, you know, posing around with them, but not functional in terms of an actual weapon. They're just not sturdy enough. Maybe somebody has made a sturdier version of it, I don't know, but I didn't feel like tracking that one person down just for this one video. So, and before we start, just to clarify for those who are new to my channel, yes, I do know that it's just a video game. No need to point that out. It's just fantasy, I know, and game designers are free to create whatever the hell they can dream up. It's art, I get it, no problem with that. But people have asked me specifically if something like this would be practical in real life. If you lived in historical times or in some kind of strange parallel Earth where you wouldn't get immediately busted if you used one of these to assault someone, and where it somehow was not ethically objectionable to do so. So yeah, in such a hypothetical scenario, would something like this be practical? And the short answer is not particularly. It doesn't really have too much of a point. Well, it has one point, but you know what I mean. Does it offer any actual advantages over just holding a knife or dagger in your hand? Well, you could say the main advantage is concealability, because when it retracts, it's basically invisible. But you can fairly easily conceal a dagger on your arm, especially if you have a frilly shirt like this with wide puffy sleeves. It's not too difficult to conceal that. And also you could come up with a rig that basically just brings it up to where you can grasp the handle with your hand. And in fact, there is a version of that. Connor does have a hidden blade, which is basically just a dagger with regular handle attached to this rig, which he can actually tilt and then grasp with his hand and then use normally. And that's a lot more practical. As far as the concealability and inconspicuousness, if you will, of the hidden blade is concerned, if a hooded guy walks up to someone and suddenly touches them and they just drop to the ground screaming or gurgling and blood spilling, that's just a little suspicious, don't you think? Any other potential advantages? Well, as long as the blade is retracted, you of course have your hand free to hold onto things, grasp a ledge, or hold another item. But then again, even when you're holding something the conventional way, you can still grasp another item if for some reason you feel the need to. And the fingers are still usable to a large extent. So that's not really that much of a problem. And of course also you can always do it pirate style. Arrgh. You do definitely have some problems with this. Like, first of all, there's a certain risk. You need some kind of release mechanism, of course. People who have made these have usually done that by having a ring on the finger, which is attached to a wire, and that's connected to the release mechanism, so that they use the finger in order to make the blade spring out. But that would be very easy to just release accidentally when you don't intend to, which could be a little awkward. I mean, just imagine you're chatting up that hot tavern wench and everything is going well, you're about to go upstairs and you're about to put your arm around her and suddenly ching! Or you're just standing there in front of your favorite tree after a hard day of assassination work, relieving yourself, and suddenly... That would not be very pleasant, I imagine, so you would definitely need some kind of safety. And in order to activate the safety, you would most likely have to use your other arm, because if you just have that attached via wire or something to a different finger as well, that doesn't make it a lot safer. And then if you have to reach over with your offhand to flick the safety first anyway, if you've already done that, why not just attach the blade to a sheath to your forearm in the first place and just draw it and hold it the way people have conventionally held a knife or dagger for thousands of years. I mean, there's a reason for it. And of course, reliability is also an issue. If you have a spring-loaded mechanism in the first place, that can fail. It can jam, you can have some issues with that. It can either spring out when you don't want it to, or fail to do so when you do need it. And when you add in safety as well, as every knife or firearm owner can tell you, that makes the thing a bit more complicated and thereby more failure prone. The more separate mechanisms you have, the more can go wrong, basically. And I'm thinking it wouldn't be particularly advantageous for an assassin to end up doing an empty palm strike instead, because the blade doesn't deploy. But the biggest argument I see against strapping a blade to the wrist is that the assassin would make his attacks a lot less effective. When thrusting into something, you will of course encounter resistance, so you'll have pressure in the opposite direction. What's holding this in place? Well, nothing but friction, basically, because you have the bracer or whatever setup here strapped to the arm, and this can move and it can eventually work itself loose, especially if you consider all the spectacular parkour stuff that those assassins are doing. Their gear may eventually shift around and straps may loosen up, things like that. Pretty much any weapon that is designed to allow the user to stab with it has a guard. And the purpose of that is it prevents your hand from slipping up onto the edge and cutting your hand on your own blade as you encounter resistance in the thrust. So since the hand is pushing against the guard without sliding around, you can actually generate more pressure, which leads to deeper penetration, which is not supposed to sound dirty, I swear. In this case, of course, there is nothing to stop the entire thing from shifting around and being pushed back. If you made the entire bracer long enough to rest against your upper arm, that wouldn't be very desirable, because that would not only limit your movement, but also that would mean that you're getting the entire force slapping against your biceps, which would be a good way to injure it. Of course, on the longer hidden blade, there is an unsharpened section here, which the assassin could theoretically grasp and thereby attempt to prevent from shifting too much. But they don't seem to be doing that in the game, really. You generally see the attack like this without using the hand at all. And even so, it's still, there is nothing that acts as a stop in the direction of the thrust. You're still applying pressure perpendicular to the direction of the thrust. So it doesn't really help all that much. In my opinion, what would be a lot more practical would be a push dagger. If the assassin were to rig that up in such a way that it springs out. Again, you have the problems with safety and reliability, but at least holding onto a push dagger like that would allow them to have the blade protrude between the fingers, and it would rest right against the palm. So that way you can generate a lot of force and punch with it, basically, and it would be very secure in the hand, very effective. Of course, people have come up with assassination weapons in history. One example would be the Indian baknak. I have no idea how to pronounce that, so I probably butchered it. But that's basically a metal bar with two rings where you put your index and little finger through, and then you have the claws on the inside of your hand. So as long as you conceal the inside of your hand, that would be totally invisible, and you could just walk up to a potential victim and tiger swipe it, basically. So overall, I think that the hidden blade is a very cool design, definitely badass, and I like how they did it in the game. The animations with it look pretty good too. The fighting is not overly realistic, but it's not too bad either, and it looks good. It doesn't look ridiculous or completely off the rocker, over the top, so I definitely like that. But for an assassin who values just practical efficiency more than style and badassery, this here would be much more effective. So that's pretty much all I have to say about the hidden blade. Thanks for watching and happy assassination. No, wait, don't do that. That's not socially acceptable.